Oh boy. So you remember Mexico Beach, right? The city that's in a municipal crisis. Um, the city that had an election in April, and the voters decided they wanted a new direction. They wanted transparency. A city that received more than $100 million in FEMA money after Hurricane Michael devastated the city. It's like the worst wind hurricane in 50 years in the United States of America. It was unbelievable. And, Mexico Beach needs to have a bunch of stuff rebuilt. Like the pier still hasn't been rebuilt. Lots of questions about the money. And that they brought in the consultant to say, well, $49 million went to debris pickup and all that kind of stuff. Well, also, after Michelle Miller defeated longtime mayor Al Cathy, the owner, by the way, of Ace Hardware in Mexico Beach, after he was defeated, all hell broke loose. The three incumbent councilmen have been doing all they can to keep Michelle Miller, the new mayor, from seeing all the invoices and all the contracts and all the bids. Make sure they went through the proper procedures. The three councilmen say, well, look, we can just rely on reports that are given to us by the city administrator, who at the time was Doug Baber, but he up and resigned and headed down south in Florida. And so the assistant city administrator, Michael Manning, he abruptly resigned a week or two ago, and he's following Doug Baber down to south in Florida to Crystal River, Florida, where they're working together now. The month after Mayor Miller was elected, the accountant, her name is Debbie, she abruptly resigned. But the three council members have kept her around as a consultant for $75 an hour to help navigate the annual budget that's late. The annual budget's late. The last two annual budgets indicate problems with internal controls. So they have to hire now a new city administrator who's like a helper to the mayor, who's the CEO and the chief elected administrative and fiscal officer of the city. It's different than it is in Panama City, Lynn Haven, and Panama City Beach. The charter's different. It's set up different. But now the three incumbent councilmen, Adrian Welle, Jerry Bad Liability Smith, and Richard Iron Fist Wolf, we call him that because he pounds the table. He gets very aggressive, especially toward the women. He likes to point at them and lean into them, and he's still trying to figure out why the press is allowed to record, by the way. It's because, in case you're watching, it's because the Constitution, which you swore to uphold and defend, the First Amendment, that's why. But we didn't allow it. It's not our policy. Okay. So you're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you. So they had 10 applicants apply for the job. It's a great job, city administrator, if you've got the management skills and the education and the experience, and as it happens in Mexico Beach, the contacts. You know, if you're well connected, if you were the, say, I don't know, if you were super well connected with the former mayor Al Cathy, the owner of Ace Hardware, you got a leg up. I'll prove it. The two of the council members interfered with the hiring process. 10 people or so applied. And the council met and they narrowed it down to 6 that they wanted to interview. But 3 dropped out. Okay, 3 of them dropped out. So that left, this was all happened this week. So that left 3 candidates to interview. Now, I'm going to tell you about these candidates. And I'm going to share with you what happened on Monday. And then I'm going to show you what happened at the meeting on Tuesday, and you're not going to believe who they selected. You're not going to believe who they selected to replace Doug Baber as the city administrator.
It's a hot time in Florida, and my friend Ryan can make sure your air conditioning is running at peak efficiency. He could even install a new one, built to a higher standard, American standard. Find out more at PCAirRepair.com. You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
Okay, so you remember the story, right? You remember this is city administrator Doug Baber. He replaced Mario Gisbert in 2020, and he was the only one that had full access to all the financials. And he's out of here. And then you'll recall that it got there was a lot of drama about a month ago or so, 5 weeks ago. And Councilman Adrian Welle, who is the most nervous and concerned for some reason, he said, we all got to get along. And then when Mayor Miller and him disagreed, he got up and walked out. That's him walking out. And then they all said, well, everybody's quitting because the mayor's too mean. The new Mayor Meaning. She's making everyone quit. Right? And then Jerry Bad Liability Smith followed him out. They went on strike for like 2 weeks in protest until their demands were met. And part of their demands were they wanted to be the ones to decide who the next city administrator is. All right. So let me just break it down this way. So there were three candidates left. Mr. Day, Mr. Marsh, and Mr. Hubbard. Now, Mr. Marsh scored the highest when they all picked their candidates, all five. He got the highest score. And close behind him was Mr. Hubbard. And there was also a third candidate who scored really well, and that's Mr. Day. And they were all scheduled to have interviews, 1 hour long interviews with the entire council on Tuesday afternoon after the morning city council meeting. So there was a city council meeting in the morning on Tuesday. And after that, these three each had an hour long slot to be interviewed. But that was too much of a risk that their chosen candidate may not get the job. So Adrian Welle, Councilman Welle, calls up Mr. Day and says, there's some concerns. I got like 20 some citizens are telling me they looked you up and they're concerned about your background. He had no problem with his background. You look at any of our backgrounds, you'll find something, but there was nothing significant at all. So the day before Mr. Day was scheduled to be interviewed by the council who decides if he gets hired or not, gets a phone call discouraging him from coming from Adrian Welle. Could you imagine? Don't you think that ought to be a question when they're all together, all of them together, like everybody else, out of fairness? Then, as soon as Mr. Day hung up the phone on Monday, he gets a call from Jerry Bad Liability Smith. And he says the same thing to him. So Adrian Welle and Jerry Smith discouraged Mr. Day from coming to the interview. Back-to-back phone calls. So that he decided, I looks like it's stacked against me. I'll just withdraw. So they're down to two. Yes, on Tuesday. Now they're just down to two interviews. Mr. Marsh, who had the highest score, and Mr. Hubbard, who was close behind him. Now, here's the big reveal. Mr. Hubbard, Chris Hubbard, he's already been the city administrator. He was the longtime city administrator under Al Cathy. He was the city administrator back in the early 2000s for several years he's Al Cathy's guy, the former mayor. You say, Bernie, so what? That means he's got experience. Okay. He's also the boyfriend of the accountant who abruptly resigned the month after the mayor got hired. So Jerry Smith and Adrian Welle really, really wanted former Mayor Al Cathy's old city administrator and the boyfriend to the accountant who quit, but they've still got her around until they can get him in there. I remember a week or two ago, I said, who are they going to hire? Is it going to be somebody fresh? Is it going to be somebody with ties and relations? I'll say. So during the interviews on Tuesday afternoon, first, Mr. Marsh, the candidate who scored the highest, he got interviewed. And then Mr. Hubbard, because they're down to two. They ran off the third guy, Mr. Day. And during the interview with Mr. Hubbard, which, by the way, I don't think they should do this. Mexico Beach, I don't think they should be broadcasting the interviews, but they have been. So they sit down for the interview Tuesday afternoon. And Adrian Welle, Drama Queen Welle, says to the city clerk, "We're not broadcasting this one, are we? We're not live streaming." And everyone goes, "What?" Councilman Welle, on his own, somebody who only has legislative power, no administrative power, he told the clerk and the IT people, do not live stream the interviews. Can you believe that? Why would he do that? On his own, unilaterally. And then when the second candidate, former Mayor Al Cathy's city administrator back in the day, and boyfriend to the accountant who quit, when he got his time for interview, Adrian Welle says, "I move that we hire him, Chris Hubbard." And Jerry Smith, who made the phone call to run off Mr. Day, says, "I'll second that." And old Richard Iron Fist Smith, Wolf, he was the third vote. So they have voted to hire the former city administrator for Al Cathy and the boyfriend of the accountant who quit. That's who they voted to hire. Now, right before that afternoon interview, they had a city council meeting, and I want to show you what happened. You're going to like this. This is, let's see which one, right here. Okay. So this is the city council meeting on Tuesday morning before the interviews. And Mayor Miller is going to address the phone calls made by Adrian Welle. Watch how nervous he gets. I swear you're not going to believe this. And yeah, I'll save the rest of my commentary for that. But let me thank a couple more sponsors, and then we'll be able to go right to this. It's unbelievable.
When your life is on the line, hire the lawyer who lives in our community, works in our community, and worships in our community. I'm El Saulene, your Panama City Beach lawyer. 850-215-0628.
Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
All right, so this is the beginning of the meeting Tuesday morning. She finds out that Adrian Welle, the two guys by her each side, Adrian Welle and Jerry Bad Liability Smith, they both called one of the three candidates Mr. Day, and whatever they told him, he didn't come. So she found out about it before the meeting, and she called him up. And she said, what's going on? I heard that you got a phone call and you're not going to be coming to the interviews later today. Tomorrow. Yeah, later today. And he tells her the story, and she's going to explain it right now. Watch on her left in the teal shirt. Watch his body language.
While we're down to two people for our interview, there was a call made to one of the people, Mr. Day, had a call from two council members. And it was very disheartening to hear that he would have interviewed had he not received those calls. So I feel that, I know that we've got a huge political climate going on here, but I think our our ethics in contacting a potential candidate is inappropriate to do prior to an interview. And I understand that people would like to know about these people prior to them being hired. And I do understand that. And we plan, I'm sure the council wants to vet everyone and vet them fairly. So those were questions that we could have asked in the interviews that we are not now going to be able to ask. So I just, want people to think about as we move forward that we want to get the best person in this seat, and it doesn't matter how long it takes. We don't have to do it today. We don't have to do it next week. We have to do it, and we have to do it fairly. That's all. Citizens' comments. Oh boy, here I go.
Okay, so I'm going to go past the citizens' comments to where this discussion picks up again. Okay, so after the citizen comments, you're going to get in the red shirt, that's Councilman Richard Iron Fist Wolf. And he's going to interrupt the meeting and say this.
All right, so here's what I was told by Mr. Day. He received a phone call.
Before we move on, just real quick, on your comments, can we the table make a comment on your comments?
I think they are at the end of the agenda.
I'd like to make them right now, based on, you've already sent a message out there that two councilmen called one of the people that need to be interviewed, Mr. Day, and that's the reason why he dropped out. We're transparent. Who called him?
I called everyone.
Okay?
I did too. I called them and said, I appreciate you putting in the application for me. I didn't ask no questions. All I did was tell him thank you.
I didn't ask questions. I just thanked him for applying, talked to him about applying, asked if they had questions for me.
I think it's fair to the citizen rather than just send a message out there to be.
Look at Adrian Welle's eyebrows are above his glasses.
Transparent. We're going to be transparent. Let's talk.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, all right, so here's what I was told by Mr. Day. He received a phone call from Mr. Welle, and then Mr. Welle was warning him about the situation here and his background check, and they discussed that. And he said immediately when they hung up, he said he was very nice, by the way. Immediately when they hung up, Mr. Smith called, and he said it almost seemed like they were in the same room.
Whoa!
And that was his comment. And I asked him, I said, sir, would you have continued your interview today had you not received that phone call? And he said, yes, ma'am, I would have. And we had another long conversation about his experience, and I thanked him for applying, and I told him that if he chose to try to apply again, that the applications are open till filled.
Well, that doesn't seem very fair, does it? Now, wow. Mayor Miller says that she called the guy who these two councilmen called, the third candidate, Mr. Day. And she just said in a meeting that Mr. Day said, geez, as soon as Adrian Welle hung up, Jerry Bad Liability Smith called me. It almost felt like they were sitting in the same room. Now, that, of course, would be a crime. That would be a sunshine law violation. And we know now that state attorney, the lead prosecutor in the 14th district, Larry Bassford, we know that Larry Bassford prosecutes people for the sunshine law violation. At least he prosecuted Michelle Miller. The only politician, and she wasn't a politician, she was on the planning board. But she said that she was going to run for mayor, so they arrested her. Sound familiar? They didn't arrest her, I'm sorry. They prosecuted her. There was no law enforcement involved. The state attorney's office, the prosecutors worked directly with former city administrator Doug Baber. And that right now, right there in the green shirt, that city attorney, Clint McCahill, they were working behind the scenes with Larry Bassford to prosecute an upcoming candidate for mayor. And they did, but they had to drop the charges because they didn't have any, there was nothing, no information. They had to drop it. And they thought that would damage her and she wouldn't win the election. Well, she did. But the state attorney's office, I guess, to my surprise, is willing to prosecute elected officials and appointed ones who are on boards for sunshine law violations. If they were sitting in the same room making that phone call, that would be a sunshine law violation. But let's see if either of them set the record straight.
And he called you?
I called him.
Oh.
Yes, sir. I called him. I was in
Same thing you and Mr. Wheeler did.
Yes, because he dropped out. He was not a candidate anymore. So I wanted to find out why he was not a candidate. And I called Miss Catherine as well this morning. And nobody had called her. So, no one had called Catherine. I actually talked to Miss Vickers this morning as well. And no one had talked to her. Mr. Day is the only one that was called, that I called, of those three people that said that he had received a phone call.
I called all three that were interviewing yesterday afternoon.
So, that's transparency enough for you, Mr. Wolf?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
That second part of my request, yes.
All right. Is that transparency enough for you, Mr. Iron Fist Wolf? Now, I want you to notice something. Nobody denied it. Councilman Welle and Councilman Smith did not deny it. We weren't sitting in the same room. In a court of law, if you don't deny it, it's admitted as fact. I would bet that they weren't. I mean, they don't need to be. They can just text each other or wink, wink, nod, nod. We know they like to go after that these days as well. Right? So I doubt they were sitting in the same room passing phone numbers back and forth on something that they're going to vote on. But they didn't say, I mean, Councilman Welle corrects everything else. I called the three, but neither one of them said we were not in the same room. Interesting. All right. So they, the three, let me get rid of this. The three incumbent councilmen have voted to hire as city administrator to replace Doug Baber, the former city administrator under former Mayor Al Cathy, and the boyfriend of the accountant who abruptly quit. Boy, it's almost like they really, really want somebody on the inside to be the closest to all those city financials, doesn't it? Gosh, I can't believe you can't just hire somebody fresh. No, they can't. Why? Could you imagine trying to sleep at night knowing that Mayor Miller and everybody's getting closer and closer to the invoices and the contracts and the bid process? I mean, that looks really fishy, Adrian. That looks really suspicious, Mr. Smith. Well, we just called to tell them all good luck. Yeah. Your body language betrays you. I also want to take a minute to tell you about Panama City Beach. Because while that was going on, I was in Panama City Beach. Right? And they were busy passing an ordinance to violate your rights and liberties if the city manager declares an emergency, but not for longer than 42 days. I mean, they're reasonable people after all. And I went up there, as did about 5 people, and expressed our concern. And they said, but the state already has this ordinance. We don't even need to pass it. We're just trying to clarify in case we need future lockdowns. I mean, there might be another pandemic coming up before November of 2024, but there might be another pandemic. You never know. There could be terrorism. And by the way, the governor did it. Why aren't you getting on Governor DeSantis's butt about it? I'm going to play for you the most deceitful member. And could you imagine having that title on the Panama City Beach City Council? I mean, if you're the most deceitful on the Panama City Beach City Council, that is saying something. And the title goes to Michael Jarman. I mean, I'll tell you, I will just tell you, these are my opinions about what I think of them. I think Mayor Sheldon, money mover Sheldon, is the most corrupt. I think that the vice mayor, Paul Casto, is the least bright. And I think Phil Chester, well, they might be running neck and neck, the last two there. So Phil Chester doubles down, though. And but I want you to hear Michael Jarman. The guy is probably the brightest of the 4 of them. Sheldon might be brighter than him, but Jarman certainly believes he is. He's very much like Adrian Welle. Very much like Adrian Welle. All right, I want to share this with you. This is how he defended violating your rights and liberties based on one person. And what I want you to notice is how infallible he pretends that he is, and probably believes that he is. So his argument's going to be, 1, the governor did it too. 2, if the city manager declares an emergency and detains people and impounds property and enters your home without a warrant, if he bans the rental of golf carts at a time when it's often needed most, if he, what else do they do? I mean, if he does any of these things, does curfews only for one class of people, but not for another class. If he does something and it's wrong, we can get together real quick and set it straight. So he wants you to know that violating your rights and liberties is what it says. Don't worry about it, because if one guy makes a mistake, we're here to clean it up. Panama City Beach, the council, that was subpoenaed in 2020 by the feds for public corruption. All right, let's listen to Jarman, the most deceitful member of the Panama City Beach City Council. Thinks he's the smartest.
In relation to dictator, a dictator has no ramifications for his actions. In the case of this ordinance, there can be severe ramifications for someone's actions. They can be terminated with cause. If you think that this is a tyrannical action, then the governor, like was said, can be a tyrant. The president can be a tyrant. But in this case with the ordinance, that what has been done in regards to the city manager.
Just think about what he just said. I mean, the guy has a degree in divinity, I believe. I mean, what kind of logic is that? He just, oh my God, listen to
Manager is that we as a council can act immediately if we feel something has been done incorrectly.
Now, their reason for doing this is because they need to act immediately at a time of emergency. So listen to this. The reason they say they need to pass this for the city manager to be able to declare an emergency is because they have to act quickly, right? Because last time there was something, it would have taken 5 hours to convene the board and they need to be able to act quicker. And now he's saying we can act immediately, which completely refutes the whole point of this. And secondly, he believes that if 3 people out of 5 vote for something, then it cannot be dictatorial or tyrannical. Deceitful. If he doesn't know that his logic is upside down, he ought to know. I believe he does know. This is why I say he's so deceitful. Plus, I especially hold people to a higher standard who, are wear their religion on their sleeve.
Now, in the case of a governor, you have to go through the court system to get that overturned. In the case if it was just the mayor or the city council, you would have to go to the governor. But the way this ordinance is designed is that we can take an immediate action if something is wrong.
Immediate action again. And they're infallible.
It's been stated that the violation of due process. Well, in the state of an emergency, such as a riot.
I need to explain what he's going to say in advance. You're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. This ordinance that they voted on, they give themselves the authority to detain people. And rather than, getting a warrant, for example, or arresting upon probable cause for an individual and bringing them to jail, they are asserting that they have the power to detain people and put them in City Hall on city property, and that they can impound property and enter your home without a warrant. Now, police are allowed to do that if they're chasing a bad guy and they're in hot pursuit and the bad guy jumps through your yard. Okay, that's called hot pursuit, fresh pursuit. They don't need a warrant to do that. Also, there's something known as exigent circumstance. Okay, exigent circumstance would be, for example, if they knock on your door, which they're allowed to do to talk to you, and they hear somebody in the back screaming, "I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to shoot you." That's exigent circumstance. They don't have time to get a warrant. They got to go now. This idiot is going to make an argument that exigent circumstance can last 42 days and does not apply to an individual. I kid you not. Watch this.
Or something like that. That would be legally considered an exigent circumstance. And an exigent circumstance is one where an immediate reaction is required for public safety.
That's not what it is. Oh my God. I almost can't. I mean, I don't think he believes this. I think he's just trying to trick you. He's so deceitful. Oh my God. That's exigent circumstance. Huh, Mike?
This will not stand, This aggression will not stand, man.
All right, let's get.
where a warrant is not needed.
Unbelievable.
Once again, someone has argued, and just so you understand, I listen to every comment, and I research every comment that's made. Someone sent me an email stating some court cases showing that the police do not have a legal obligation to help someone.
So now he's way out. Now it's a non sequitur. Now he's just talking about other stuff because he's lost.
I don't think that applies here.
No
I
kidding.
think that if there is a riot in the street, the police should help.
And they don't need to pass an ordinance that allows them to detain people, impound property, enter other people's homes without a warrant because of that. That is a non sequitur. Logic doesn't follow logic. The lines don't follow. This is so dumb.
If that riot goes into a building, then they should be able to shut the building down and dissolve the riot.
You don't need this ordinance to do that.
No one is an oath breaker,
You are.
because if this causes us to be oath breakers, then the governor himself is an oath breaker, or
Okay. What kind of argument is that?
can be.
Anybody can
Drew is
be.
bound by his understanding, and any city manager is bound by his understanding, that he must make a very clear decision in exercising any emergency ordinance.
See, I don't believe he believes what he's saying. He can't even barely get the words out of his mouth. In other words, every city manager is so, what's the word I'm looking for? So experienced. They've got the expertise, and therefore they can't make a bad call. He doesn't believe this. Look at him.
Because the ramifications, immediate ramifications if necessary.
I thought the reason you were doing this is because you needed immediate action. The guy refutes himself. It's unbearable.
Are severe. Everything in the ordinance exists in state statute. This is not manufactured for our own pleasure. The state of Florida, in its statutes, grants these powers to a local municipality, whether we have an ordinance or not. This ordinance gives us clear instructions as how we are going to exercise those powers and how we will control them.
No, it doesn't. And by the way, there are 412 cities in Florida. Just because the state has enacted a statute that grants cities the authority to do that doesn't mean the cities have to exercise that anti-constitutional authority. A real council member who represents the people and is oath to the Constitution. By the way, one of the powers is they can ban church worship. They can ban peaceful assembly. Clear violations of the First Amendment. Anti-constitutional, illegal. Just because the state adopts it, what a real city council would do would be to pass a resolution that says we won't do those things. You see how he leaves that out?
We don't, even if we didn't have the ordinance, these things could be done by state statute. The state also requires that we do this and amend it to our emergency management plan. The language of 42 days is straight from state statute. It is not something we came up with on our own. It was.
The state statute violates the Constitution, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land when it comes to these constitutional rights and liberties. I mean, if this guy doesn't, I think he does understand, but if he, I do not think Paul Casto or Phil Chester understand this. I don't think Sheldon gives a flip about it. But this knucklehead, I think, knows that state statutes that violate the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the prohibitions against these things, are null and void. They're anti-constitutional. And you as a city ought to say, we will not do that because we will honor the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. I mean, this guy is just, I can only bear him for another minute or two, and then I'm going to stop.
It was designed to make this ordinance match the state statutes.
Look how smart he thinks he is.
So please understand that this is not a willy-nilly ordinance, nor can it be applied.
We understand it better than you, Jack. And by the way, these guys would never, ever, ever debate me on these issues. They would never come on the show and do that. Do you know they used to do that when I had the radio show? Because, look, things have changed a lot in America. I started the radio show in 2007. And I had some serious debates with Frank McKeithen, former Sheriff McKeithen, and I respect him for that. Had some serious debates even recently with Bill Husfeld, the superintendent of schools, and I still respect him for that. The fact that he was willing to come on here and debate because I treat them properly. I'll give them more time than I talk. But right around 2012-ish, 14 maybe, something happened where we won't grant oxygen to that conspiracy theory. We won't grant oxygen, Tucker Carlson. We won't grant oxygen, I don't know, whatever show, to your conspiracy theories and misinformation because we are infallible. That is the hallmark of propaganda. It's anti-American. Ideas ought to collide and reason ought to prevail. But they're cowards. And they'll say, Bernie's not acting in good faith. Bernie's not being honest. It's a conspiracy theory. He's being paid to say these things. I lost my job for saying these things. You can take a radio show, even though it was good radio shows syndicated around the state. They said, stop saying what you're saying about local Republicans, or you're going to have to go. I said, but I'm telling the truth and do what you got to do. The argument that I would say something because somebody pays me to say something I don't believe is so stupid and so demonstrably false. But that's why they won't come on. They'll never do it. Cancel culture and avoiding debates, to me, are the top two ways that you can identify propaganda. And I can't go back to him. He's driving me nuts. But that is a deceitful propagandist right there. Anyway, all right, enough of that. I'm going to wrap it up. I want to say, of course, thank you to, you know who, the Unknown Patriot. That's who. Thank you, Unknown Patriot. Also, if you don't catch all the shows, but you want to get the email every Friday night, if you don't want to miss any of these shows, any of my posts, any of the reporting, or the lampooning I do to those who deserve it, make sure you do this. It takes 20 seconds to subscribe to the once a week email that has all the shows and all the posts in one single email, bernie.substack.com. It's free. Takes about 20 seconds to put your email in there. bernie.substack.com. There's also a way, if you think it's worth it, there's also a way for you to support my efforts. bernie.substack.com. And if you would like, I got to change that because it's berniestore.etsy.com. berniestore.etsy.com. That's where you can get some stuff to support the show and make a statement. Okay, I'm out of here. I'll see you soon.